Imagine scrubbing a deserted truck stop restroom at 2 a.m. when your rag snags on a purple heart medal. Proof of courage, forgotten in grime. Who lost it? Why was it hidden? Stay with me and watch one night janitor spark a chain of redemption that rumbles clear across the interstate. Dolores Brooks had long stopped listening to the music in her earbuds. It was just noise now, something to dull the hours as she dragged her mop across the gray tiles of the exit 223 Truck Plaza women's restroom. She knew the routine by heart, stall by stall, sink by sink, mirror by mirror. The same flickering light over the second basin. The same cracked tile beneath the paper towel dispenser. It was all as predictable as the ache in her knees that flared by midnight. At 59, Dolores had few illusions left. Her life had settled into the rhythm of ammonia, silence, and thoughts she'd rather not think. She'd been working this night shift for 9 years. 9 years since she'd spoken to her daughter, Angie, since that final argument. Words hurled like stones, the kind you regret before they even finish leaving your mouth. Angie had left for college and never came back. Dolores hadn't even known she was pregnant until she saw the baby announcement on Facebook, 3 years after the silence had started. A granddaughter. She didn't know her name. Dolores didn't cry about it anymore. Not out loud, anyway. It was just after 2:15 a.m. when her rag snagged on something behind the third sink. Not the usual wad of gum or broken plastic. This was solid. She reached behind the pipe and pulled it out. A small velvet box, the kind that belonged in a drawer next to wedding rings or war memories. She opened it. Inside, resting on faded black felt, was a purple heart. She froze. The metal surface was scratched and dull, but the engraving was still clear. CPL Henry Michaels. For wounds received in action, Dolores's breath hitched. Her fingers trembled slightly as she ran a thumb over the edges. She glanced at the mirror, half expecting someone to be behind her. The room was empty, just the distant hum of the soda machines outside and a moth tapping lazily at the ceiling light. She looked again at the name. Who loses something like this? This wasn't some souvenir or cheap trinket. This was earned in pain, maybe in blood. She stepped into the hallway, holding the metal tight in her palm like it might vanish if she let it go. The truck stop was unusually quiet. A couple of long haulers slumped over their coffees in the diner. One was watching a muted news channel, the screen showing a looping weather map. Another man, probably a mechanic by the oil on his boots, was napping in a booth with his cap over his eyes. Dolores made her way to the small service desk, where a kid in his early 20s was half asleep behind a glass case of novelty lighters and belt buckles. "Anyone leave this behind?" she asked, holding the box up. The kid blinked. No? What is that?" "A medal. Purple heart. Military." He leaned forward, suddenly more awake. "Whoa, that's serious. You sure it didn't fall outta someone's bag?" She shook her head. "It was stuffed behind a sink." He shrugged. "We can log it, but I dunno if anyone's coming back for something like that." Dolores nodded slowly but didn't hand it over. Instead, she walked back to the janitor's closet, closed the door behind her, and sat down on an overturned bucket. The medal sat in her lap, silent and accusing. She stared at it for a long time. Later that night, after her shift ended and the desert sky began to pale at the edges, she drove her beat-up Saturn to a viewpoint just off I-40. From there, the road stretched out in a long, empty ribbon toward the horizon. She turned the metal box in her hands. She didn't know Corporal Henry Michaels, didn't know if he was alive or if he'd left this behind on purpose. But someone had bled for that medal. Someone had been brave enough or unlucky enough to earn it. It didn't belong behind a sink. By noon, she had printed 20 flyers at the public library, each with a photo of the medal, the name, and her cell number. Found, Purple Heart, CPL Henry Michaels. Contact Dolores, exit 223 Truck Plaza. She posted them at gas stations, rest stops, and every bulletin board she passed on her way home. And that night, just before she clocked in, she borrowed the dusty CB radio in the break room. She didn't know the codes or etiquette, but she pressed the button and spoke. "Anyway, this is Dolores at exit 223. I found something important. Looking for a driver named Henry Michaels. If anyone's heard of him, tell him his medal's safe. I want to give it back. There was a long pause. Static. Then, a slow voice. Copy that, Dolores. Ain't heard that name in a while. But I'll keep an ear out. She let go of the button and sat in the quiet hum of the truck stop, watching the desert night stretch out before her. Dolores had spent days wondering how something so sacred ended up crammed behind a rusty sink. The working theory, passed quietly between the janitor's closet and the diner counter, was that someone had stolen it. Maybe a drifter, maybe a kid, and lost their nerve. Too ashamed to return it, too proud to throw it away. So they wedged it where only someone looking closely might find it, hoping the universe would deliver it back to its rightful owner. Dolores Brooks felt she had something to look forward to. Dolores stood on the gravel shoulder of a way station just off I-40, a roll of masking tape in one hand, flyers pressed against her hip with the other. The wind kicked up dust and paper scraps, stinging her eyes. She smoothed the corners of another black and white flyer onto the bulletin board next to ads for mobile tire services, injury lawyers, and a laminated prayer for truckers. She stepped back, checking the placement. It had been 3 days since she'd found the medal. Since then, she'd printed 50 more copies of the flyer, refilled the toner at the library, and driven further from home than she had in years. The Saturn's AC had wheezed out on day 2. Still, she pressed on post, tape, drive, repeat. She started to get responses, first through scratchy CB chatter, then a few uncertain text messages. Some called just to say thank you. Others left vague tips. He used to run eastbound around Gallup. Or, think I saw him in Amarillo couple months back. One voice, deep and slow, called in around midnight. You talking about old Henry? Man pulled me outta a ditch once with nothing but a toe strap and a prayer. But no one knew where Henry Michaels was now. One night, back at exit 223, Dolores sat behind the diner, drinking warm Coke from a paper cup. The truck stop was coming alive again. Diesel engines humming, air brakes hissing, metal groaning under weight. She stared at the flickering neon of the auto shop across the lot, then heard someone behind her drop a heavy duffel bag with a grunt. Is this where the lady with the medal works? Dolores turned. A young woman, mid-20s, slim, Korean, with a braid looped under a red ball cap, stood with grease on her sleeve and sweat streaked across her cheek. That depends, Dolores said cautiously. I'm Sunny. Real name's Eun-Soo Park, but nobody uses that out here. She extended a hand. Heard you're looking for a Henry Michaels. Dolores shook her hand. I am. You know him? Sunny shrugged. Not really. I just started last month. But I heard guys talking on Channel 19. They said you've been asking good questions. They ended up talking for an hour. Sunny had just gotten her CDL and was on her second solo run. She was hauling car parts from Albuquerque to Barstow and terrified of screwing up. Her dad, a retired Marine, had tried to talk her out of the job. He said I was too small, too nice, too everything, she said, taking a sip of her coffee. Maybe he's right. I cried twice today. You didn't quit, Dolores said. That's what counts. Sunny grinned, wiping her eyes. You know, I think I want to help you find this guy, just to prove I can do something out here that matters. From then on, Sunny became Dolores's unofficial scout, pinging way stations, asking fuel desk clerks if they'd heard of Michaels, even slipping flyers into windshield wipers at rest stops. One night, she messaged Dolores a photo. A napkin scribbled with Michaels helped me after a jackknife, Flagstaff, Jan 21. It was left pinned to a vending machine. No name, just gratitude. Then there was Big Al. Dolores first met him when he came limping out of his cab around 3 a.m., face slick with sweat and one hand gripping the side mirror like a crutch. She was cleaning the diner floor when she spotted him wavering near the register. Need help? She asked, setting down her mop. I just need sugar. Any kind of sugar. She got him orange juice and sat him down. After a few minutes, his color returned, and his breathing slowed. Diabetic, he mumbled. Hate admitting it. You say you're sick and people start assuming you can't handle the load. They got to talking. Al had been on the road for 37 years. He'd known Henry Michaels, he said, back before Henry's rig got repoed and he started borrowing trucks for short contracts. Henry was the kind of guy who'd pull over for a squirrel if it looked lost. Al chuckled. I saw him once stand in the middle of traffic waving cars around a stray dog. Had no fear, that man. Dolores recorded their chat on her phone with permission. Then she recorded Sonny, too. And another trucker named Bernard who said Henry once gave her his last tarp during a storm. Each story chipped away at the myth of Henry Michaels, not as a hero carved in marble, but as a man who quietly stitched kindness across 1,000 forgotten miles. Word got out. Dolores's CB check-ins turned into nightly roundtables. Voices from Arkansas, Nevada, Idaho. Some just wanted to talk. Others wanted to help. One said, "If you find him, tell him Joe from Tallahassee says thanks for teaching me how to change a belt in the dark." Another, "He helped me when my kid was sick, just stayed on the radio until help came." Dolores started to realize she wasn't just looking for Henry. She was building something thread by thread, voice by voice. A web of people who believed the old stories still mattered. The last call that night came through around 2:40 a.m. A low voice, rough but steady. "This is Lucky 7. Tell Dolores, Henry's still alive. He's out there. Last I heard, he was running short haul through New Mexico. But he don't stop much anymore. Says folks forget you fast." Dolores pressed the mic. "Not this time," she said. "Not if I can help it." The fourth morning broke metallic gray over exit 223 Truck Plaza. Dolores was restocking napkins when the bell above the diner door gave a reluctant jingle. A tall man in a weather-beaten coat paused on the threshold, boots planted as though the floor might tilt. His beard was steel gray, his eyes restless under a frayed cap. He cleared his throat and unfurled a crumpled sheet of paper, one of the flyers Dolores had taped to waystation corkboards up and down I-40. The black and white photo of a Purple Heart stared back at her. "Did you post this?" His voice rasped, like it hadn't been used on anything softer than a CB mic in years. "I did," Dolores answered, stepping from behind the counter. "Are you Henry Michaels?" He nodded once, stiff, wary. Only then did Dolores notice the tiniest tremor in the hand holding the flyer. The paper rattled like a trapped moth. She gestured toward the back office. "I have something for you." Inside, she unlocked a small metal cash box. Wrapped in a napkin, cushioned between grocery receipts and her last pay stub, lay the metal. She unwrapped it carefully and set it on the desk. The sun from a grime-streaked window struck the purple enamel just so, making it flash, alive again. Henry didn't reach for it at first. He stared, jaw clenched. When he finally picked it up, his thumb traced the inscription as though relearning his own name. "I thought it was gone forever," he whispered. "Didn't even know where I lost it. Oklahoma? Kansas? Everything blurs after enough miles." Dolores poured them the truck stop's unforgivable coffee and slid a mug his way. "It wasn't gone," she said. "Just waiting for someone to care." He gave the faintest huff of disbelief and sat. They talked through 2 refills. Henry was 67, combat wounded in Fallujah, 23 years with Westgate Freight. "Company restructured," he said, voice fraying. "Reclassified me as contract labor halfway through my career. Pension disappeared like it had never been promised." PTSD carved pauses into every sentence. Lingering silences when cutlery clinked too sharply. A reflexive scan of exits whenever the door jingled. When his story tapered off, Dolores slid her phone across the table and tapped play. Big AL's gravelly thanks, Sonny Park's admiring laugh, half a dozen other voices rolled out. Truckers recounting the day Henry pulled them from ditches, shared tools, waited on the radio until EMS arrived. Henry's eyes shone, but he held the metal like a talisman against emotion. "You recorded all that?" "Proof you matter," Dolores said. "In case anyone, especially you, forgot." The news spread faster than a rig with a tailwind. Sonny live-streamed a short clip. "This is Corporal Henry Michaels. Westgate has taken away your pension. Let's fix it." The messages ignited social media and chat groups for truckers. Everyone rallied to Michaels's cause. Biggle rolled in wearing a crisply ironed shirt. Wore paint for meetings, he joked, and handed Dolores a sticky note. My cousin's a union lawyer. He doesn't blink. Westgate did. On day 3, the company emailed a cease and desist, accusing Dolores of defamation. She printed it, read it aloud during a live stream, and fed the letter, slowly, ceremoniously, into the diner's trash compactor. The clip reached hundreds of thousands of views before sunrise. A veterans nonprofit reposted Sonny's video with its own call to action. By day 5, network news producers were chasing the story. By day 6, Westgate's HR director was leaving increasingly polite voicemails. They met in the truck stop manager's cramped office. Henry in his best denim, Dolores at his side, the nonprofit's lawyer on speaker. Westgate capitulated, full pension reinstated, lump sum back pay, and a public apology drafted under the lawyer's unforgiving eye. Henry signed, pen trembling. Didn't think anyone would fight for me, he murmured. Dolores smiled gently. Sometimes you have to start the fight to find out who'll swing with you. The paperwork was finally signed. Henry's pension reinstated, his back pay scheduled in installments, and, perhaps most importantly, the silence he'd carried for years was cracked open. The veterans nonprofit that had taken an interest in his story connected him with a trauma counselor who specialized in combat vets. The first session was rough. The second, a little less so. But by the third, Henry no longer clutched the armrests like they were lifelines. Dolores had been at the truck stop when the news broke. The same coffee-stained booth where Henry first sat was now strewn with clippings, scribbled notes, and a map with a thick black line drawn from Arizona to North Carolina. She traced it with a red marker, paused at one particular along the way, Willow Creek, and circled it quietly. That night, Henry stood beside his rig, arms crossed, unsure of how to ask the question that had been inching forward in his mind since the moment Dolores played him those recordings. "Want to ride shotgun?" he asked, eyes fixed on the fuel pumps instead of her face. Dolores blinked. What? I got a run going east. Arizona to North Carolina. Long haul, lot of nothing in between. Wouldn't mind company. Wouldn't mind you. For a moment her old self, safe, small, stuck, wanted to say no. But the woman who taped flyers to dusty corkboards and went toe-to-toe with Westgate's lawyers just gave a slow grin. Hope your cab's big enough for 2. Their first 100 miles were quiet, save for the hum of tires and CB chatter crackling in and out. Dolores, propped up on a foam cushion, adjusted her sunglasses and reached into the glove box for a mint. Henry nodded toward the console. You can change the station, you know. It ain't sacred. Dolores gave him a look. I'm not touching anything that's labeled in duct tape. He chuckled, the sound deep and unfamiliar coming from him. Fair. Somewhere near the New Mexico border, Henry's hands tensed around the wheel. A loud pop from a passing semi set his jaw rigid, and for a few minutes, he drove in silence, lips pressed together hard enough to go pale. Dolores reached out not to touch him, but to flick off the radio. "Wanna name it?" she asked gently. "Whatever memory's clawing at you." He exhaled. Fallujah. ID on a convoy road. Truck 2 exploded. We heard the metal rain on the roof before we heard the blast. She nodded, not pushing, just holding space. "You don't have to carry that alone," she said after a long moment. They made a habit of it. For every hour on the road, they took turns trading stories, some painful, some ridiculous. Dolores talked about her daughter, Lila, how she used to write poems on napkins and hide them in her lunchbox, how one fight, one moment of saying too much too loudly, had driven her away 15 years ago. She knew where Lila lived now, knew she taught 2nd grade in Willow Creek, knew that every year, around her birthday, Dolores would stare at the address she'd saved and do absolutely nothing. "She doesn't want to hear from me?" she said one night. Their rig parked at a rest stop under a canopy of stars. "Not after how I ended things." Henry was quiet. Then softly, "So say that. Say exactly that. And see what happens." By the time they reached Tennessee, they were moving like a team. Dolores had taken over CB duties, slipping into the lingo like she'd been born with it. Henry even let her back the rig into a loading dock once, laughing as she chewed the wheel and barked instructions at herself. "You sure you weren't a driver in a past life?" he asked. She smirked. "No, but I was a hell of a babysitter. And this thing drives about the same as a loaded stroller." But as they neared North Carolina, the laughter gave way to silence. Willow Creek was just 2 exits ahead. Dolores hadn't spoken for the last 20 miles. "You still sure?" Henry asked, voice low. "No," she admitted. "But I'm more sure I'd regret not trying." He pulled the rig off the highway and onto a quiet residential road. Past the gas station, past the feed store, past the school with faded murals on the brick walls. The sign read, Willow Creek Elementary. Children were just filing out to recess as the truck slowed to a crawl. Dolores spotted her instantly. Lila, hair longer now, hands clapping to get her students in line. Her face older, but unmistakably hers. Henry killed the engine. The silence that followed felt sacred. "You want me to come with?" he asked. She shook her head, unbuckling slowly. "No, but wait here. If I come back crying, you're buying pie." Dolores stepped down from the cab, boots crunching gravel. She didn't run, didn't freeze, just walked, each step heavier than the last, but also somehow lighter. At the chain-link fence, Lila turned. Saw her. The pause was immediate, wide-eyed. A step, then 2, then a cautious smile. An hour later, Dolores returned to the rig. Her cheeks were streaked with mascara, but her eyes were bright. "She wants to meet again," she said. "Just coffee." "But she said my voice still sounds like home." Henry nodded slowly. "So, pie?" Dolores laughed, truly laughed. "Definitely pie." As they pulled back onto the road, she looked at him. "I don't know what this is, Henry, but I know I want to see more of it." He smiled. Healing rides easier with someone in the passenger seat. And together, with the desert behind them and the Atlantic ahead, they rolled into the long stretch of road not as strangers, but as 2 people who found something more than redemption. They found reason to keep driving. This journey reminds us that one brave act can rewrite 2 broken lives. If you'd found that medal, would you risk everything to return it? Let me know in the comments. And if this story fueled your heart, hit like, share the ride, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more roads worth traveling. See you in the next video.